Hey addicts, welcome back to another Alita manga review. This time we're back with volume 8, which I can't believe we're almost done with the series. It's gone by so fast, even though I know I've taken a hiatus multiple times. But we're going to try to do this a lot better than the last time because this is towards the end. It's a very cluttered volume. There's a lot of information going on, so there's going to be a recap of sorts, but maybe not necessarily a more traditional recap. So I'm just going to start off by take our first look at the Barjacks. Really, with the Barjacks, we just see them, executing or going into the phase of their plan that they had discussed in the last volume, and seeing that climax really come to head between them and Zalem, and it not ending so well for the Barjacks, with Din having to end up disbanding the Barjacks, so to speak, or at least send them on a new mission of guerrilla tactics, infiltrating and sabotaging the factories, and Din, I guess, accepting the fact that he is going to go out in a blaze of glory, so he's going to go and try to, just, I guess, destroy as much Zalem stuff as he can, which leads to the kind of oddly adorable duo between him and Kamui, which I actually really am a fan of, and I'm interested to see how that's going to play out, because I don't think it's going to end out in death, but it might. But then we get a look at Zalem, and they are finally revealing their hand and actually executing that plan. So one of the big things that we get is them making their move on Alita and betraying her by showcasing the thing they've had in the works since the beginning, and that is the A2 unit, which is a android doppelganger version of Alita, and seeing that they want this unit to replace her. And also on top of that, another big whammy of information is Bigot welcoming Desty back in the fold, wanting him to return to Zalem at his former glory, and a little bit of a tease of drops for other information that I can touch on a little bit later. But then we also get Chaos, which Chaos doesn't, he has probably the smallest part in this volume, but I think it's still worth mentioning. So with Chaos, we get to see him learning about himself. Through his power, he's able to touch the sword that he used as Din in the last volume, and with that, he's able to, realize this new information about himself, and this really does put a new, I was gonna say put a new perspective, but I mean, he kind of changes his heart about his father, probably more so than he, not a good impression, not for the better, as I'm not sure it wasn't great to begin with, but we get to see that, and setting him on his path of out of neutrality and going more into a stance. So he's kind of able to do this through a last broadcast of his radio, kind of saying what needs to be done, and this goes into a whole speech that, to be honest, I mean, it's the same vibe as plenty of other stories, so I'll just put it on screen real quick so you can see it. It's just the good rally, we need to do this for the better. Anyway, and then lastly, seeing Chaos actually confront his father, Desty, and it not ending up so well for him, because, at the end of the day, Chaos is still kind of a weak punk-ass bitch. And plus, Desty's kind of scary when he's cosplaying as Pennywise. But anyway, we get to see on the Alita side of things that she is having the opportunity to reunite with Ito, but unfortunately it's not as she's imagined it, with Ito losing his memories, not by happenstance. It is by his choice, which I think, to be honest, is the worst part of the volume, is the whole thing they did with Ito. But the I guess the sort of impact that it has on Alita, it nails it on the head. And so thankfully, even though the Ito thing is disappointing and probably a great waste of potential, at least the Alita side of things isn't suffering from that. But after that, we also get to see Alita face to face with the doppelgangers that Zalem has sent after her. And this leads to probably the coolest fight in the volume, I would say. There's not really that many fights in this volume, to be honest. Well, that center around Alita. So this, I would say, is a very cool fight, and maybe even one of the toughest fights she's gone up against in the entire series. And it's just really interesting because with doppelgangers, I've always been a fan of that. Just like in the last volume with split personalities being a guilty pleasure of mine, doppelgangers are also kind of a guilty pleasure. And it's just, I guess, coincidental that we get to see both of them back to back. But anyway, after that, we get to see Alita arriving at Desty's lab, a little bit battle worn, but ready to kick some ass nonetheless. And this leads to, again, getting segue information of Bigot talking to Desty about this proposition he has, but also Desty using his smarts to find a way to subdue Alita into a dreamlike state, which we get to see a very cool, I guess, segment where she is placed into a scene from her past, which that being the motorball ring facing Joe Segan, and Joe Segan's back, and I really like that, not only to see him again, but also just the purpose he serves in this volume. I mean, I know it's a projection of Alita's own mind, or her own thoughts about how she sees Joe Segan, but it's just a really cool thing, and I think the benefit of having Joe Segan teach her or show her some enlightenment so that she can be the pinnacle of herself is really cool. So with that being said, that's all of the stuff that happened in the volume. I'm going to talk more so about my thoughts and just some little bit of info. I guess I should say real quick before I forget, we do get a little bit of info of, I guess, teases about something higher than Zalem, or at least something that Zalem answers to, or at least Bigot answers, and that is the Melchizedek Computer and Ladder Council. And we don't know much information about this. The only information that we really get is that the Ladder Council is an extraplanetary council, which Desty not only finds in high regards and is the main reason why he's accepting faggots. I'm sorry, I mean Bigot. Well, to be honest, after the information we got in the last volume, I'm wondering if his name is just a misprint and it actually is supposed to be faggot. I'm just saying, maybe that's a poor taste of a joke. If you're sensitive to that, whatever. I think that's funny. But anyway, we get to see Faggot Bigot, give that to Desty, and with that piece of information, Desty full-heartedly agrees. And so I think this is maybe something that I'll play in the next series, or maybe we'll actually get some form of touch on it in the next volume, since I'm maybe not expecting this, but I'm maybe hoping that we'll get to see Alita in Zalem at least a little bit. But with the Ladder Council being an explanatory wow, I just brushed over that word. Extra-planetary council, there's room for that connection of Alita's past, because we know that she's had at least part of her life on Mars. So that's exciting to see. But the other big thing, I guess I'll just... you know what? I'm not going to want to talk too long because I don't want to make this a long video. But... I'll just get into some of the thoughts I had. So with the double, right, with the doppelganger, really did like that, but I think it serves as a really great, I don't want to say stepping stone, but just progression of Alita. I think, since the volume of Zapan resurfacing, I said that really weird. I said that like almost like a Street Fighter stage one. But anyway, so since that volume, I think Alita's really needed development of her character. She's already a very capable person in that, she can just decimate anybody, because she has the power of Panzer Kunz, and that's extremely OP. But I think the big thing that they really showcased is, her internal side, you know, her motivations, her direction, stuff like that. And I think that really does get brought up and then solved in this volume, and that starts with the doppelganger fight. I think it's really cool to see that the double kind of mirrors herself in the same way she kind of showed herself in the figure volume, which is, I think, arguably her lowest point, or at least the point where she is least like herself, or closest to not being what she wants to be. And I think not only that, but I think it, it being as a cool callback, but I think it shows just how much Alita has grown since that point. And I think that's something that you maybe don't notice as much when you're just in the moment reading, but I think it's cool when you have moments like this where we're still getting something really cool, but it lets you kind of look back and just kind of reflect that, wow, yeah, she really has, she's still got some work, but she's getting there. She's made some progress. Now, the other thing to kind of go with that, because it is segued a lot, not only in the doppelganger fight, but with the kind of interaction and moments she has with Josegen in this. And I just think, with characters, because Alita, I mean, she does have moments where, she's getting ripped apart, she's got only her torso and one arm, but she's able to still beat this insanely large boss. So I would say she kind of falls under the OP characters, or not OP, but she's a very powerful character, right? And so I think having these internal moments and then showcasing that that's her weakness and that's her progression as a protagonist. It's not her getting stronger in the physical sense; it's her getting stronger in her in her mind and her motivations, her internal character. Sorry if I'm just repeating that. It's just trying to get my point across, I guess, and repeating it's not the way to go about it. So let me give you some examples. So, for instance, we really did see that Alita kind of lacked motivation in finding, ways to go on in a meaningful way. And I think we saw that all the way back in the volume Figures introduced, and, Figure, I think, was kind of the catalyst of her finding motivation again, and I think it's just kind of build upon it from there. Whether it be with Lo or with Kamui resurfacing, or just saving people in general. And then I think ever since she's lost Ito, she kind of lost her her direction, because he was kind of her compass in what she needs to be, or where she needs to go. And I think with Dream Josegen, he's able to give her kind of the cure for the self-doubt that she has, and it's really able, because she kind of has this acceptance of herself in a way, it builds confidence that she's able to produce her own direction, and that's going to lead her to being the pinnacle of herself that Josegen mentioned in the volume. So I really do like that, and as long as they don't back out on that or undo any of that for the next volume or other parts of the series, I think that will really hold up the rating that I give this volume. If not, then they might, lack a little bit looking back at it. But I think just seeing the end of this volume and where Alita is potentially going to be at, I think this is a really good place for not only for her to be, but for in aspects of the story and like what battles we're going to get. I think that will lead to some really cool stuff. Because she'll just be at her best. Now, the one big thing that I really hate about this volume is Ito's kind of, I don't want to say fate, but just the direction they decided to go with Ito. Thankfully, like I think I've already iterated enough of, it doesn't affect Alita in a bad way in terms of the writing. I think they were able to still hold intact the perfect execution of what Ito's fate means for Alita. But for Ito himself, having his memories lost, and not only that it was something in his control, but he purposely sought it out, I think it kind of just seems out of place for his character. I think Ito, just for seeing, how good he was, or at least wanting to strive for Alita to do good, but also have that selfishness about him. I just don't see that one he would, want to go essentially or die without putting on that information to somebody else if it was such a bad thing, or that he would really want to say goodbye to Alita without physically seeing her, or being reunited with her in general. So that just seems like a misstep of his character, but I also think it's kind of wasted potential for not only the interaction that Alita would have with Ito, but also her final battle with Desty. I was thinking that they set up Desty to be this really twisted guy where he just has really no value in human life, or I guess regard to, sacrificing human life or manipulating it in a way that is, grotesque and just dehumanizing, if it means that his goal or his experiments are coming to fruition. And I think not holding on to Ito for that, I mean, granted, we know Desty didn't know that Alita was alive until like the last volume, so maybe he just didn't see the need to. But I don't know. It's just I just think it would have been really cool to see Ito in that mist of Alita and Desty's final battle. But needless to say, I think it will end up being maybe a little bit better, because then it can focus strictly on Desty versus Alita. If they decide to go that approach, who knows? This series does take a lot of left turns. But yeah, I just think, at the baseline of it, I think it was just really out of place for Ito's character. Now, the one thing I will say about Zalem's reveals, I mean, we knew this was coming, and yeah, I think I got some things right. Not all of it, obviously. This was one that, was a bit vague, so it was hard to really go into certainties on what would be it. But overall, I think what they showed was good. It's not something that I find overly out of this world, because there is some minor problems with it. But overall, I do like that. They for sure went that Zalem's going to be its own evil entity that Alita will probably have to face, and it is kind of terrorizing to think that Desty's I guess potential with Zalem's resources is even a bigger threat than just one or the other going up against Alita. So that's something that I think is really positive about it. But yeah, overall, I think it was a good volume. It's on par with the last volume, which I think it's a good and it's a double-edged sword, in the sense that, hey, it's still a 7, still worth it. So that means, I would say you're still going to enjoy the volume for the most part. But I think it's bad in the telling that it's a bit underwhelming than what it should probably be at, because since the last volume was a setup volume and this is supposed to be, where we're getting the reward to a lot of it, it just felt like it didn't quite reach that. And I think part of it's, because of the Ito misstep, and also with the volume being plenty cluttered, and that's partially due to just some weird focuses on some characters that don't really matter at all, and kind of extending that out, or just spending some time on some characters that, again, we haven't been introduced to for very long, so we don't really have that much of a connection to them. And I think I can talk to the comments, if you guys want to talk about that feeling, whether or not you guys feel like it's necessary or not. I feel like, especially with the reporter on the Buick, I think is his name, on the Bargex, that's something that is a really cool and kind of interesting approach with that character in that world, and how it interrates. But I think it's just like, what is this doing here? It just seems like such a mismanagement of a good idea, and just an odd place, but that's just my take. So I would say, guys, it's kind of, I'm kind of iffy, to be honest with you, going into the last volume, because this one I felt like was supposed to really blow me away, so that I'm super hyped for the last volume, and I'm just kind of like, let's see where it ends, you know? So hopefully the last volume is definitely going to knock off my socks. The last volume will not be done with the series, or at least what I own and what I will cover. There's a spin-off, I believe, and also a collection of kind of like mini offshoot stories. So we'll cover that as well. But you guys need to let me know if you want me to cover Last Order or not. I know it's a bigger series than I think even the original run. So if you guys are going to want me to cover that, I'm going to really need some support, or at least vocalization on if people want that. If not, then we may not even do it, or if we do, it will be a long time. So anyway, guys, that will conclude this. I might even cut out some of this so that we can get down to 15 minutes. But anyway, guys, I will see you for the next video. And as always, peace, addicts.